All wings report in. Austin standing by.
Mike, standing by.
Austin, standing by.
The Rogue 3 podcast is locked on target. Whether it's movies, shows, books, comics, or more, we're going to be coming to you from a galaxy far, far away to celebrate all things Star Wars. Hey guys, welcome to Rogue 3. We are here today to talk about the second arc of Andor. That's going to be episode 4, 5, and 6. Ever been to Ghorman? I have friends everywhere, and what a festive evening. We are missing our Georgian prince. Austin is unfortunately away at a wedding, so we are recording this just with me and Mike.
Yeah, and it's actually really exciting because it's the first episode that Austin and I are recording in the same place. We were never done that before, but now we actually are together for Star Wars weekend. We do a yearly celebration of coming together, watching Star Wars, and this year we finally get to record a podcast episode together.
Is 2 years yearly?
Yeah, 2 years is yearly. Absolutely it is. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and break these down. All three of these episodes were written by Beau Willimon. This is the same writer from the Narkina 5 arc, and he is also going to be writing the Dawn of the Jedi movie. So, Mike, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm excited. Narkina 5 was a great arc. Oh my gosh. I think everyone's highlight, basically, from season 1. And so knowing that the writer came back and is not just doing this arc, but is also doing more with Star Wars, having them do the Dawn of the Jedi movie. I'm really excited. We talked about last week with the mention of the Rakatan invaders and being 25,000 years ago, which is when the Dawn of the Jedi movie is supposed to be set. So there are some threads with Andor that I'm hoping that he would use and connect to bring that story forward and have it connect to things that are going on in the, I guess what you could call the present day Star Wars, the newer arcs, things like that. You know, it's kind of funny to think of it as present day Star Wars, but
it makes me wonder if maybe some of those artifacts that we saw in the artifact room might be present in the Dawn of the Jedi movie.
Yeah, and we'll talk about one or two of those later on as we get to it. But this episode, or this arc rather, we're not going to do what we did last week, which is talk about each individual characters, their stories all the way through every episode. We are going to go episode by episode because these stories have started to intertwine a little bit more. We see some of these characters interact quite a bit more than they did in that first arc. So knowing we're getting closer to when they're all a big group, all interacting together, it's been exciting to see these stories start to intertwine.
So from a timeline perspective, we're currently sitting around 3 BBY, or as the episodes like to say, BBY 3.
Right.
I'm still not quite sure why they're doing it's doing
subtle
that.
difference,
It is a
but
difference. I'm curious if there's a reasoning or if that's just how they wanted to stylize it.
it's also kind of funny to almost think that's in universe, them acknowledging that 3 years from now there's going to be an attack that these characters don't know about.
Right.
Is kind of a different decision. I'm always afraid when they put the year in. This is very obviously regimented, very specific, but we've seen people mess up timeline things before, thinking of Spider-Man Homecoming, that their year completely wrong, but thankfully that so far hasn't happened. But there are a lot of things going on rebellion-wise at the same time as this. So we want to acknowledge some of those different things. So the bulk of Rebels Season 2 is happening during this same year. And so we know their occasion on Malachor is happening during this time. Some other stuff with Phoenix Squadron is growing. They're on Gorel and they're being hunted by Inquisitors. So that's all happening at this time during the same year.
We're really seeing the rebellion start to, although they still feel very much separate, the rebels are starting to kind of join together. And I think that through this arc of Andor, we're really seeing that is necessary. Rebels shows a smaller rebel cell kind of doing that. Andor is kind of showing the larger rebellion. They're not formed yet, but we're really starting to see that they need to.
Right.
Because otherwise we're going to continue to have defeats.
Yeah. We see these disparate groups all kind of acting. We have Maya Pei in that group in that first arc not going well. We saw Anton Krieger's group in the first season get destroyed. These disparate, separate groups, it's not working out for them.
And of course, now it's all coming to a head with the Ghorman front, which we know is going to end very poorly.
Yeah, we know that the Ghorman front was mentioned by Saw Gerrera in 5 BBY. So they've been operating for a few years. I wanted to talk a little bit about Ghorman as the planet. We heard and saw that propaganda piece in that first act. But the one thing that we want to mention from the start is Ghorman as a planet is along the Rima trade route, which passes through Ariadu, Tarkin's homeworld. So we have that connection to the old legends of this Ghorman massacre. And from the start, I love that that's being honored. Instead of just changing a legend story to fit whatever purpose they wanted, they're trying to incorporate it in. They're honoring it. They're using it.
We're building on top of it.
Right.
You know, it's still a very important piece, and it informs where the Ghormans are today. It was part of the piece that led them to want to rebel the way they are. And, you know, in my opinion, this feels more powerful than how it would have felt in Legends. In Legends, it's the Ghorman massacre. Obviously, it's a part of it, but it doesn't feel like it's as big as canon is making it out to be. So it's interesting to see the Tarkin massacre kind of starts everything, but then the Ghorman massacre is really going to cause an explosion.
Right.
We'll see if it's an actual explosion.
Yeah. So we can kick off with, have you ever been to Ghorman?
I've never been to Ghorman.
No, not yet.
We saw clips of it.
A little bit, yeah. We're going to kick off with the title character, Andor, and a little bit of Cassian and Bix's story, because we saw quite a bit of Cassian kind of separate and their escape from Mina Rao, and wondering, you know, what happened to them over this last year. Again, that 1 year time jump has given these characters time to grow and change in different ways, and we kind of have to almost jump back into their lives at this just moment. We are only seeing snapshots of their lives, and I think that's a cool way to do it.
It's interesting to get these snapshots, and I think for Bix, a lot has not changed. She's still, you know, we're starting the episodes again with a nightmare, and she's still very clearly suffering from what happened to her in season 1, and it almost seems like it's getting worse, because I don't know if we know whether this is the case in season 1, but at this point she's now turning towards drugs.
Yeah.
To she says it's to get to sleep, but I imagine it's probably for more than that.
Right. And she wakes up with a blaster in her hand. They're in a safe house. If that blaster goes off, there are going to be people that come and basically blow their cover, blow this safe house that not only are Cassian and Bix using, but Luthen has also stayed there a couple times. And that would be a pretty bad occasion that she's clearly not able to control this issue, these nightmares that's happening, and it's leaving a lot of scars for both of them, I think.
It's interesting that we're here on Coruscant hiding kind of a hiding in plain sight kind of deal.
Yeah.
I guess it's easier to blend in on Coruscant than
Trillions of people
in the middle of Mina Rao, where we're just being spotted.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's very true of like hiding in plain sight. I like that idea. And I liked seeing a little underworld of Coruscant. We talked about it with Mask of Fear, that we see a little bit of Coruscant from not the penthouse levels, not the upper echelon. And we see a little bit. They go to a bodega and buy some groceries. And we see Cassian a little uneasy about talking with people, which is cool to see. Like, yeah, he's fearful, he's observing, but it's impacting how he could just function in a day-to-day society.
It's nice to see some more varied types of people too. It's nice to see some aliens again.
Yes.
Andor really doesn't have a terrific amount of aliens in general. The series doesn't. So it's nice to get that reminder that we're still in Star Wars.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's not just a human world. It's a world with, you know, tens of thousands of different species.
Which is pretty cool. It makes it a little less grounded, which for Star Wars I think works.
Yeah. And for Cassian and Bix, you know, their story in this first episode, really not that much happened. Eventually Cassian does get the call from Luthen. They use a light shining in the distance to signal whether there's a new mission or not, which I kind of like that's their method. They're not sending messages around. It's just a light to signal.
Very bad signal-less.
It is very bad signal, yeah.
And it's interesting how Bix is the one kind of watching for it. It's almost like that's her role.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's to kind of help ground her and give her something to do rather than just sit there in the safe house. But that's most of their arc in season 1.
Yeah, there's not too much that they do. It's kind of we're jumping back in, seeing, okay, not that much has changed for them. But then, of course, Cassian will be headed to Ghorman in the next episode, which I think we can talk about who is already on Ghorman.
It was very surprising for me to see Cyril on Ghorman already. When I first saw him, I thought, oh, well, this is a radical change for Cyril. I thought, have we broken up with Dedra?
Right.
Are we moving on from the Empire? I don't see Cyril ever being the kind of guy who would be part of a rebellion, but I do, I could visualize a future for him where he's not aligned with anything, where he's just doing his work. And that's what it felt like.
Yeah,
at first.
I really thought that when we hear him talking with his mom, which was just delightful again to see.
It was.
She's such a stop.
She's so funny.
But when he was saying, you're watching too much of that news, that propaganda about Ghorman, and it's really a lovely world, I was buying into it.
Oh, I was too.
I thought he's like, oh my gosh, we're seeing, this 1 year change. He's been there. And when you get to know someone, you like them better and you get to know them and understand them. And he's seeing that. But that's not really what's going on here. He is very much there on a mission sent by Dedra, and he's spying. He's trying to ingratiate himself with the people there and get more information for them. But we'll talk a little bit later, but he doesn't really know why.
No. It's interesting to hear him explain propaganda to Edie, because there very much is propaganda. We know in season 1 that they're going to put propaganda out about Ghorman. So it's interesting to see that that's working.
Right.
And they're really trying to sway the public against Ghorman and to make it seem like, they're posh and they don't really care about other people. We'll continue to develop that, I suppose, in the next season, especially. We're expecting, we're counting down to a massacre.
Right.
And we know, based on what happens in Rebels season 3, that the Ghorman massacre must take place in the next arc, assuming the next arc continues the trend of being BBY2, which I think we're pretty certain will.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see public perspective on that develop as well. But currently, Cyril is working for the Bureau of Standards, so he's very much a part of Ghorman. We also start to meet some of the Ghorman front. They're led by, is it Caro or Caro?
I think it's Caro, right?
Caro Rylands, and his daughter Inza. And we learn a little bit more about Palma, which is the major city that we're on right now.
Yeah, we see, kind of Cyril's day-to-day of walking through the square that we later learn is a memorial for the Tarkin Massacre, where he landed ships on protesters right after the creation of the Empire. And we see people protesting. Every time we walk through that square, there are people there chanting, shouting, protesting. And Cyril knows who they are. He's learned the spider salesman, and we see later in his apartment he's bought several of them. He knows he's being watched by them and listened by them. So this has all been an act, a front. He is actively spying, and he's so giddy about it.
Oh, he loves it. And he, there's a piece where I think it's floss he's using, and then he uses it to tie a string around his door, and he gets home and he sees, oh, someone has been in my apartment.
Yeah.
And he loves it.
Yeah.
It's exciting for him. It's not scary. It's exciting for him.
Right. I imagine that he did this as a kid, or, living with his mom, who is very much the overbearing person. Like, he would need to have a little bit of privacy, and maybe he had learned some of this growing up with someone who would watch him very, very closely. But then we see him go to a meeting and listen to the thoughts and concerns of the Ghorman citizens. And Caro is one of the leaders in the community. He's one of the salesmen, or one of the families that operates selling the Ghorman silk. But he's also a vocal kind of leader in Palmo.
He absolutely does an expert job talking to them and making them believe. He starts out a bit aloof. He's not just totally like, I want to help the rebellion. They kind of have to slowly kind of bring him into it.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting.
And he operates slowly. He takes his time, which is the opposite of what we'll see the rebels do later in these episodes.
Exactly. The way that the Imperial tactics versus the rebellion tactics at this time are in sharp contrast. The rebellions are desperate. Of course, they're always desperate, but we're not thinking as coolly or rationally as the Empire is, which is why the Empire is still winning. You know, we see at the beginning of A New Hope that stealing the Death Star plant is really the first major victory.
Right.
Obviously, they have some smaller victories before this, but it's the first major victory. So we're really not doing great as a rebellion, and we're gonna build on that a little bit more.
And yeah, we see the ISB really still in complete control, and they're taking their time. I loved seeing Lonnie come back with the ISB group. That he has a seat at the table. We see him in the first season. He's kind of Dedra's assistant, but now he has a seat at the table. He is a member of that group, and
he's wanted.
Yeah,
like he gives some great feedback.
Yep.
You know, at first you think he's giving this feedback that they don't want to hear.
Right.
They actually love it. They're pleased that he's giving this alternative perspective.
Pendergast says, this is why we have this group,
right?
Is to hear outside opinions or thoughts that are going to challenge what we're already doing. It makes us better. It makes us smarter and think about what's happening.
And what he really says here is that we have too many pieces. We're moving too many parts. We're arresting too many people, and we can't keep up with it. We see one of the other agents basically saying, I can't keep up with all of this.
Right.
He's kind of trying to hide it, but it's pretty obvious he can't keep up with this.
I think it very much goes into the idea of kind of a psychological safety, the idea that you grow and you're a better team if you can admit mistakes. If you're able to have a safe environment where you can admit that something's not working without fear of retribution, you're going to be able to talk about that and fix and change those mistakes. If you ignore them, they're only going to grow.
It's interesting to think of the ISB. For those of you who don't know, it's the Imperial Security Bureau. You wouldn't think of that as a place where we'd want that. You know, typically we'd think of, oh, the good guys love to talk about their mistakes and we're going to make things better and we love each other. At least Pendergast wants honest feedback. And that's not something that you would expect from others in the Empire. A lot of them don't want that. They don't want to try to sit there and try to fix mistakes. They're going to kill you if you're not successful, and we're going to find somebody who's better.
We see that with Thrawn's story, that he's willing to tell people, you're wrong, this is bad, and they don't want to hear that.
No, they don't. And he's right.
He's right.
I mean, he's right.
Yeah.
He's not good, but he's right.
But that's for that episode, that first one, really, those are the two people that are focused on.
Yeah.
Mon Mothma, her story is not very big in that episode.
Drips of Mothma. She's going around talking to different senators, trying to drum up or not support, but rather to have people vote with her against the bill, which is going to increase prison sentences.
Right. The one that we learned about 2 years ago that essentially is why Cassian gets sentenced.
Exactly. She's not very successful.
Right.
Even with the Ghorman senator, he's afraid of retribution against the Ghorman. They're already not doing well. The Empire's not being fair to them, and he's worried it's going to get worse. And so we're seeing Mon Mothma kind of lose support for the bill. As you know, in our Mask of Fear review, we talk about she's really able to get all these different senators to come together and vote against this bill, and she wins. She doesn't, of course, win because the Emperor can choose to not go through with the bill, but she is able to get the support for the bill. And now she can't get any support. Yeah. And we're seeing her grasp loosen. And I think we're going to get to the point where Mothma realizes that she's going to have to do something more extreme. And I think we're going to probably see that in the next arc.
I think at this point, we kind of start to see in this arc that the Senate is meaningless. Yeah. That the Senate has no power, no influence anymore. And I think that's going to lead to her saying, you know what, I'm out of the Senate because it's not worthwhile staying in because nothing can get done.
And she realizes she's going to be more effective
elsewhere
in a rebellion leadership position. That brings us on to the second episode. I have friends everywhere.
I love that title.
I do too. I love that. That's a reference to the line that several of the Ghorman front mention as a way to kind of like identify themselves to each other.
I think that it's probably coming from Luthen because I want to say that multiple different people that are more attached to Luthen try and use that. And maybe that's one of the ways that he has reached out. He knows these groups. He's worked with them, communicated with them. The Ghorman front says, he's just a voice. they've never met him. They don't know who he is really. He's just a voice. But I think I'm wondering if that comes from Luthen, and he's the one that has friends everywhere.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that. And we're going to dive more into Luthen's friends everywhere a little bit later.
Yes.
For now, Cassian goes to Ghorman. He gets a new alias. So we've seen him in an alias before. Now he's going to be Varian Sky. He's a fashion designer. He's very charming, very attractive. Beautiful suit.
Yeah, he very much like jumps into character quickly. And it's interesting to see the contrast of when he's in his normal persona, his everyday life. He's in this bodega. He's scared. He's frightfully looking over his shoulder. When he's Varian Sky, he's confident. He's just walking through. He's completely someone else. He's not a rebellion person. He is totally absorbed in it.
And it's so we get to Ghorman. We're not really breaking character. We see Varian Sky or Cassian Andor talking to a bellhop, and we talk more about the Tarkin Massacre that you guys heard us mentioning earlier.
Yeah, it was mentioned in season 1 by Cyril talking about this memorial, and he's aware of it, but even someone from off planet is aware of this story. So it's maybe we think small in the scope of the galaxy, but big enough that even off-worlders are going to be familiar with that story, which is kind of interesting to know, this story from Legends is being dropped in here, but we also think that there's going to be a different Ghorman massacre that's a much larger scale later on this season.
So we're really going to have 2 Ghorman massacres. It's interesting to get that perspective from someone who was actually at the Tarkin Massacre.
Oh, yes.
The fear. Clearly, he's still very resentful about it. And it kind of shows a brewing storm on Ghorman. Of course, we already know about this, but it's interesting to get it from someone who does not, at least I don't think he's part of the front.
Right. Just an everyday citizen.
An everyday person. And I think that's pretty cool.
And it very much goes to some of the things that we've talked about before with the Empire and how they treat people. If you treat them like dirt, they're not going to be on your side. And that was what Tarkin did, is he set off like the Ghorman front. Maybe it started to be spawned because of what Tarkin did and the resent towards the Empire. If they had treated them better, if he had not done that, well, maybe they wouldn't have a problem tapping into Ghorman. I think they still would, because it's literally destroying a planet. But I wonder how much, would change if the Empire didn't just stomp on people.
I think they'd probably get their way. Not that I'm supporting Imperial perspective, but there's a difference between having a firm hand and cruelty.
Right.
And cruelty goes too far.
Yeah.
Of course, the firm hand goes too far too, but here we are. So he meets, Varian Sky meets with Enza, and it's really fascinating to see him. He's being charming with her, but then he kind of, crosses between, we're code switching between Varian and Cassian.
Yeah, he really chastised. So Enza is the daughter of Carol Rylance, the leader of the Ghorman front, and he immediately really chastises her because she sees him and reaches out to him immediately. And he says, if you rush, if you don't take your time, you're going to make mistakes. And it's a story that plays out through this arc of rushing into things leads to mistakes.
We're going to continue to see that. He does eventually meet with Carol Rylance, where he again tells him, you're not going to be successful, and he's not going to help them.
Yeah, they're not ready.
We're not prepared. And Cassian leaves.
Yeah,
he goes back to Coruscant.
He basically tells them that you're not going to succeed. I really liked seeing inside their shop. Yes, as the Ghorman Silk, and hearing about these 12 other families basically that operate in this square. It's a good cover to be able to sweep for listening devices and know that at least their place is secure. But the ISP already knows that this is this group. And so even though they're being careful, it's too late.
Yeah. It's interesting to see this bit of culture on Ghorman, that there is a culture of mistrust, and that they go as far as to plant listening devices.
Right.
They're selling silk.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily think of that as a you wouldn't necessarily think about that as a
high priced, like competitive
market,
cut your throat market. Yeah.
So I think that's very fascinating to just see that bit of culture on Ghorman.
Yeah, it's nice to see the
normal side of Ghorman, right? Not just the rebellion, this group, but just kind of this day-to-day shop and how it's operating a little bit. And we see that with Vari and Sky when he walks in. He's saying, I'm making this. This is what I'll need. It's kind of cool to see those pieces of that everyday life, even mixed in with this code switching.
Speaking of Ghorman culture, I kind of want one of those little spiders.
Oh, the spiders are really cool.
They're really cool. Yeah. And I love that he could open it up and find a little message inside of it. That was kind of wild.
Yeah. And then Cassian leaves. And after he tells him, like, this is not going to work for you. You're going too quickly. It's going to just cause more problems. Why expose something that you say you already know what it is, right? What purpose is that going to serve? How is that going to advance your cause? It's not. And so he leaves and he goes back to Coruscant, back home to Bix.
Bringing us to Bix. While Cassian is gone, we do see Luthen visiting her, and he wants her to do a job, but he doesn't say that outright, and Bix realizes why he had come there, at which point he has realized that she's using drugs, and she's not stable, and he can't give her a job. He can't put her in a position to do that.
Yeah, I like that. We've never seen Bix on a job.
No.
At this point, but clearly he has a task for her. He trusts her enough at that point. She's been on other ones with Cassian. Maybe she has done one by herself before. I don't think it's implied that she has not.
Right.
But that he has enough faith in her to come and say, hey, this is an easy, non-dangerous job, just an observation. But as soon as he gets there, he knows she's not in a good place.
No, we're not ready for it. We are going to find out that he will give her a job later.
But that's, for Bix on Coruscant, not much happens outside of the interaction with Luthen. But also now on Coruscant, we can get back to our favorite couple of the season.
I know they're evil. I don't care. I love them together, and I want good things for them. I don't think good things are coming for them.
I don't think it's going to work out for them in the end, especially as we learn later on that Cyril is very much in the dark of all of the things that Dedra is actually doing.
Well, he does make it back to their apartment from the first arc, so it's nice to see the apartment again.
Yes.
And he realizes that Dedra had been having him followed.
Yeah.
And
we didn't know exactly where he was coming at first, but he goes home to Dedra and she says, I had you followed. He says, I know.
As opposed to a normal person who would be a little concerned by that. He's excited.
That's a little weird to have your significant other followed, especially in your own hometown.
Exactly. Cyril's very excited by it. And we have one of our delightful lights out implication scenes.
Yes.
Which is just horrifying. But
I do think it's like handles.
Oh, it's very tasteful.
It's handled well for Star Wars. We don't need skin in Star Wars, really.
No, we don't.
But it's the implication is enough.
It is.
But then the lights go out, and again for them, that's most of their storyline throughout that. We really jump between a lot of different characters. I think almost every of the main characters for this season had little bits in this episode. That didn't happen in the first episode. Mon Mothma's very little, but we bounce between all of them quite a bit.
Just a side note, I don't think Mothma appears in this episode at all. Because I remember thinking after that episode, I said to Austin that we didn't get any Mon Mothma.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, she didn't appear.
Yeah. Ah.
Isn't that interesting? I didn't like that.
But yeah. Also on Coruscant at this time, Luthen and Clea, and we see Clea working in the store and listening in to their listening devices, and she hears something that is a little bit terrifying for her. They find out that Skolden found that there's a forgery amongst his pieces, and the first thought I had was, oh no, like that it's one of the pieces they gave him. It's a listening device. That's how this is happening. But that's not the case. It's a different piece that is a forgery, but they're still in danger.
Thankfully, Clea is told by the curator of Skolden's collection that don't worry, it's not a Luthen piece.
Right.
We're good to go. Which should reassure Clea. Unfortunately, there's a listening device in one of the pieces.
And he's going to do an audit of all of the pieces to go through. I mean, that's a logical step for him to do.
Oh, that makes sense.
Dalvis Skolden is not really the greatest person. We see him kind of be, very much wealthy, very much kind of about himself. But I mean, that's a logical thing to do. He's not trying to be a villain here, but he really does start off a lot of difficulty for some of these characters.
And we are about to launch, once we get to the next episode, one of the most stressful scenes of the entire show.
Oh, yes.
But what we really have going on here is Luthen is starting to unravel a little bit. It's not, on the level of Saw Gerrera.
Right.
But Luthen's starting to unravel. He says that they have too many strings, too much information that they have to keep up with, and he's struggling under that flood of information. He doesn't know what to do with it. It really shows that the rebellion is too isolated. He's trying to do an entire rebellion on his own, just him and Kleya, and that's not going to work for him.
Yeah. And it sounds like Kleya is the one who suggested putting the Lysine device in this piece that now Skolden has.
Which he agrees to.
That's
not Kleya's fault. Which Kleya is very...
She's very insistent. You said yes. But he says, we haven't gotten anything useful out of that in 2 years. And yeah, he talks that it's they have too much information. It's very much what Lonnie says to the ISB is they're arresting too many people. It's too much to process. And Luthen is saying the same thing here, is that they have too much information. They don't have the time to process all of their threats.
In the meantime, however, he and Kleya have to go take care of this one threat. I think we're going to come back to this idea in the next arcs of we have too much going on, obviously, as the rebellion is going to form in the next 2 years. But for now, we're going to need to take care of this one particular threat, which we'll see once we get to the next episode.
Yeah.
Before we jump to the final episode of the arc, we do want to briefly talk about Saw Gerrera. We did see him briefly at the end of the last episode. Our friend Wilman from the first arc, Mina Rao team, has actually joined with the partisans. We don't know for what purpose. We don't know if he was sent there by Luthen.
That's what I was wondering, was he sent by Luthen? Who taught him all of these skills? Was that something that he had learned on Ferrix? Or has he been training separately? Because it's never said like who sent him. And I would think if it was Luthen, Saw Gerrera knows Luthen very well. I wouldn't have been surprised if he mentioned, but maybe he's just trying to keep his contact close to chest. Don't reveal his name, even to people, because as we find out, Saw thinks there's a spy amongst his group.
Yes, he does. And of course, we are panicked for Wilman.
Yeah.
We do see some of our friends from Rogue One.
Yeah. We see Benthic, or as they call him often, Two Tubes, which is one of my favorite characters. I would say he's my glup shit out. I love seeing him. I think he's such a cool design. And I like seeing some of the people from the partisans showing up. This partisans group, we know it's on the outskirts of even the alliance for the rebellion later on in Rogue One, that they're very much separate. But it is interesting to see, Wilman going there, working with them, trying to teach them how to be able to steal Rhydonium, this explosive gas that we've seen in The Mandalorian. We've seen it in other shows as well. It's interesting to see this device that they're using that Wilman is trying to teach their engineer, and it does not work out for that engineer.
We would also be remiss to mention what planet they're currently sitting on. They are on Dakar, which first appears in The Force Awakens as the Resistance's main base. So it's interesting to see this planet Dakar much, much earlier in the timeline. I don't know, I didn't check out the Wikipedia page for Dakar before this. I don't know where else it would appear.
I don't think it really appears anywhere else. I think it's similar to a crate situation with The Last Jedi where, okay, they go and they had this other base that they use. And then we later see in the comics for the Star Wars main run, we see them go to crate and try and use it as a base, but then they get flushed out by, I think it's Scar Squadron. And so it's kind of the same idea of like they had several different bases. They were split up across the galaxy and had little spots where they stayed for a brief period of time and were never discovered. And then they can use that and they have a collection of places like that later on.
Well, here we have Dakar.
Yeah, it's nice. It's always nice to see callback to other.
See, and it looks very similar to how it looks in The Force Awakens. It looks like actually pretty much the same area.
It might have been.
It may have as a shame little base.
Set something up if it's not really an inhabited planet or there's just not cities or people around that area. it's probably still fairly well set up for a larger group of rebellion or at one point resistance fighters.
It'll be interesting to see if we see Dakar again. I'm not totally sure that we will, though.
Yeah.
I think we're done with Dakar. So Saul goes off, and we're going to see in the next episode, they'll actually be working on stealing that Rhydonium.
Yeah. But then we get to what I think is the most fun episode of this arc.
It's a terrific episode, terrifically stressful.
Yes. And then the juxtaposition between the two main stories, let's say, that are going on are in this episode, the festive evening at Skolden's. He's doing this party the day before the audit, and then the operation on Ghorman. But before we dive into that, we're going to, of course, start again with that title character. We're going to talk about Cassian, who meets with Luthen and tells him that the Ghorman front is not ready. And then he also questions Luthen about his interactions with Bix when Cassian was gone. He learns that Luthen came there and had offered her a job, but then didn't. And we see them argue about Bix, about attachments, which is always something that comes up in Star Wars of when you're in something, is an attachment an issue? Is that a problem? We obviously see it with the Jedi, but Luthen very much here says Bix is a liability for him.
Yeah, she absolutely is. Cassian's pissed.
Yeah, he is not happy. We see some cracks in their relationship, which I think is going to really get wider.
Which is interesting because we see lovely moments of affection at first.
Yeah.
They clearly love each other. And so it's interesting to see Cassian just freak out over Luthen coming to visit.
You're saying Cassian and Luthen love each other?
Yes, Cassian and Luthen are in love.
Okay, I didn't realize.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, and we're gonna a little bit later in the episode. We'll talk about it at the end. We do see Bix is finally given an assignment.
Yes. Wow, it's nice to see her on her own, really leading an operation, and maybe things are improving. But before we really dive into the end, we're gonna save that juicy scene for the very end of our episode. But we're gonna talk about Luthen's other agent that had an attachment, had fallen away from that attachment. It's Vel, Vel's cousin. And since Cassian denies going to Ghorman, or he doesn't deny it, but he says, I'm not going to do that assignment, Luthen sends another of his well-accomplished agents, Vel, instead to try and work with the Ghorman front, set them up for an operation, and they start to plan a heist to stop the transports.
And just to make it even more complicated, because why not, we are also sending Cinta, Vel's former lover. It's really nice to see them reattach for a minute. Of course, the show does that on purpose to us.
Right.
And so we see them reattach, and just before they're about to go on the mission, and Vel is very clear to the Ghorman front, you are going to be doing this exactly as I tell you to.
She lays it out for them.
She lays it out. She's very firm because she knows that they're not experienced, and she came in as the expert, as the experienced person to come and tell them what to do to be successful. And we find that they don't listen. She tells them no weapon or no guns.
Yeah.
Well, we have someone bring a blaster. She tells them they have to be prepared to do exactly what she says to do. All the while this is happening, we find that Cyril is watching them during their heist.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to see them trying to pull off this heist. Cyril's watching. ISB knows that it's happening, in contrast to the first season Aldhani heist, which took months of preparations. They were very coordinated, very much in line with what's going on. Of course, they threw in the last-minute addition of Cassian to that group, but they had planned for months, whereas this is hours, maybe a day, for Vel, Cinta, and the Ghorman front to plan this operation. They make sure they're tracking those transports with the military weapons, and then they hit it, and Cyril's there. He knows it's happening, and so the ISB, we always see them one step at least ahead of these rebel groups right now. So Cyril's watching. He's reporting directly to Dedra, but he doesn't know the extent of their operation. He doesn't know what they have planned for Ghorman. That is still a secret. So he's still kept in the dark from Dedra. And I think that's really interesting that when is that going to be revealed. I feel like it has to at some point. And what impact is it going to have on Cyril?
It's fun to see him. He's so self-important right now. And he doesn't realize he's in the dark. He thinks, I don't know what he thinks he's doing.
He thinks he's just
spying on a rebellion. Yeah. And he is just a pawn for Dedra, which is really actually kind of sad when you think about their relationship.
A little bit. Yes, she's using him in a way for her own goals that he's not even aware of.
And that very sweet moment in the first season the first arc, where she's defending him to Edie, it makes you wonder, was she just trying to gain his trust?
Right.
Is she, this entire time, did she realize that he was a pawn that she could use?
Very much how Luthen is using pawns for his own gain and his operations and what he wants. It's very much the same.
I think it's very interesting how the show explores the dichotomy between the Empire and the Rebels, and how obviously they're very different, but they're very similar too.
Yes.
And they have a lot of similar tactics. Rogue One explored that, of course, as well. And as we build to Rogue One, we're going to see more and more morally gray decisions being made by the Rebels, or potentially morally wrong decisions being made by the Rebels.
Yeah. Yeah, and talking about wrong, the operation, it just goes wrong. I mean, they stop the transport, they're able to take it over, but that one rule, don't bring any blasters. Obviously, it didn't work out. And there's a couple, bystanders that almost kind of walk into this area. They didn't have it well set up to make a perimeter, be able to block and redirect people if they need, and we see one woman get turned away and she goes a different direction. But then one of the people from that meeting early on that Cyril went to, who is very outspoken, he wants to see what's happening. And he gets into a tussle with one of the guys, and he pulls out his blaster, tries to stop him, and then a shot goes off.
It's interesting to see the differences between those two Ghorman front members that you just described. One is trying to help this older woman. We're ushering her away. We're being very gentle with her. And then the other one escalates and escalates until death happens.
Yeah.
And Senta is killed.
Yeah, and it very much reminds me of the way that Brasso was killed too, where you see a shot, you hear a shot go off, and you don't know what happened until a little bit later.
I know.
And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because her and Vel had just gotten back together, or we were reunited, but now the whole operation goes bad. They have to get out of there.
It really shows just how meaningless some of these deaths are.
Yeah.
They just happen.
Right.
And
they're not heroic, like sacrificing yourself for the better. It's just a stray bolt got someone important that we cared about, right? If it had been any other Ghorman friend, we would say, oh, that stinks. But that it was Senta, it hurts a little bit. Yeah, it's heart-wrenching.
And I could see, someone being maybe upset that Senta didn't get a good send-off, and I get that, absolutely. It would be nice to see a good send-off for Senta, but...
That happens at war.
It happens in war. People just die.
Yeah.
There is no beautiful moment always at the end for people.
Right.
Sometimes they just die.
Yeah.
And at heart of rebellions and as part of war, they just die.
Yep.
So Senta died.
Yeah. But we can talk about what this was juxtaposed with.
Yes.
The other story going on throughout the majority of this episode is this party at Davos Golden's.
That sounds like a terrific party, actually. It looked beautiful.
I was really surprised by how many different people show up at this place, because there's so many, and we can talk about all of them kind of individually, but it kept almost being like, oh, there's that person. Oh, and that person's there, and this person's there, and that it was everyone except for Cassian, Bix, Vel, and Senta.
And Jimmy Smits.
Yeah, and Biggie Smits was not bad.
Let's go ahead and talk about that.
Yes. We see when Mon and Perrin first arrive that they meet a Senator Organa, who of course we all know is Bail Organa, the adoptive father of Leia, senator from Alderaan. Although at this point he may have stepped away from that role because Princess Leia of Alderaan is happening right around 3 BBY, and he steps down from his role for Leia to step into that role. So whether he's still active in the Senate, it may be around the same time where he realizes, like Mon Mothma is realizing, the Senate is powerless and he can do more outside.
In the rebellion.
But the big thing is that he was recast.
He was. Jimmy Smits, of course, plays Senator Organa in Episode 2, Episode 3, Rogue One.
Yep.
It is a little jarring. I know Tony Gilroy, the creator, put him into this episode to try to prepare us for a change. And this is nothing against Benjamin Bratt. Of course, he did a great job. It is different, and he looks quite different.
Yes.
And I think this is one of those things where you just have to let go of it a little bit and just believe. Just let yourself believe that it's Bail Organa.
It's just a recasting. Recastings aren't always easy.
No.
And especially when it's around the same time period that we've seen these characters before. When it's a younger version or a much, much older version, it's a little bit smoother. But we'll see what happens in this next arc with him to see, okay, does this person grow on us quite a bit more? And what it's going to mean for Bail. He wouldn't just put him in for this very, very brief meeting if it didn't play a larger role in where we're going.
I agree. I think we're going to see something very important for Bail come up. They wouldn't just recast him just for the heck of it. There's a purpose. And unfortunately, it seems like Jimmy Smits maybe had a scheduling issue.
Yeah, it sounded
probably
like
with Dexter.
Yes. It sounded like he was filming Dexter at the time. We know Andor was filmed several years ago at this point.
So it is what it is.
Yeah.
We accept it.
Yep.
We love it.
Mon and Perrin didn't really notice.
Mon and Perrin did not notice that he was different at all.
Yeah. They greet him when he gets here. And one of the interesting things that we saw was hearing that kind of Perrin seems to organize the social calendar. We've kind of heard that he's the schmoozer. He's in with these high society types. And so that there's a lot more going on with those right now. There's a lot of senators coming in. They're throwing lots of parties. We see the Senate and see this loyalty pledge. That's something new. I don't think we had seen in any other Star Wars media before that they all have to do in the Senate now.
The loyalty pledge was alarming. It was interesting to watch this Oath Keeper on a stand in the center of the Senate. I was truthfully expecting to see Masamita do that piece. The Oath Keeper's design, however, was really cool.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to maybe see a little bit more about him later. But Mon is clearly distressed by this oath. Obviously, this is an oath telling the senators basically to follow everything the Emperor wants.
Yeah, your loyalty is now to the Emperor instead of to a republic or even the ideals of the Empire. It is to the person, this figurehead.
And certainly not to the people who elected them.
Right. Yes. The people that they serve.
Exactly. I think this is really interesting to finally see that we're no longer representing the people anymore. We're representing the Emperor.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's been the case for 16 years at this point, but it's interesting to see it finally kind of said out loud, and it just is. No one's questioning it. Everyone's joining in.
Yes.
It's a little alarming.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this party is not one of those kind of senatorial look at me parties, but it is a big party with a lot of people. And one of the characters that showed up that I really wasn't expecting to see very much was Orson Krennic. I thought, okay, we see him in the first episode. He kind of kicks off Dedra's role in the Ghorman Massacre, or the Ghorman operation. And then we didn't see him for 4 more episodes. So I kind of thought, okay, like he shows up, does a little bit, and then we move on from him. And maybe we'll see him much later. The more close we get to Rogue One, the more maybe we'll see him. But he shows up at this party and he is delightfully evil.
Oh, yes.
But I really love seeing him and Mon Mothma throwing jabs back and forth about what they believe in and what that something means to them. The idea of my terrorist being your rebel is just so delightful.
It is. And it's an interesting statement for the real world. It's like, how do you define the difference between terrorism and rebellion?
Right.
We think of rebels as, they're the good guy. I think Star Wars really puts that in our head. The rebels are the good guys, but terrorists are bad. They're evil. Where's the difference? Where do you draw the line there? And I think, in Star Wars, it's interesting from an Imperial citizen perspective. They do seem like terrorists. Things may not be good under the Empire, but they're stable, or they feel stable, at least to the people of the core worlds. And they don't realize the atrocities that are happening in the rest of the galaxy. And so to them, these rebels are coming in and just messing up stability.
Yeah, to pull in a fan favorite quote is, from a certain point of view. and that's so true of from the Ghorman Front's point of view. They're being crushed under this empire, but perhaps other of the people on Ghorman who aren't part of the front see the front as a danger and is going to make their lives harder because they're going to draw the Empire in.
And we, of course, know that eventually that will be the case.
Yeah.
From another point of view, the Empire was always coming in. But
yes, and they don't know that.
They don't know
but
that.
It's very much perspective based. It's very much what information you have, and you then make decisions off of that. If you don't have all the information, you're probably not going to make the best decision because you just don't know.
Back to the party, we are going to, we kind of have a special away to the gallery for quite a few people. Lonnie, the ISB agent, and Clea meet up with each other, and she realizes that she can use him to help them get this listening device out of the gallery.
Yeah, if you don't remember, Lonnie is a spy.
He's a spy.
He's been a spy for years, and even in season 1, he says, "I want out. I'm done." He has a child, but he's still here.
And it just got worse for him. He got a promotion.
Yeah, very much how we see Mon Mothma kind of frightened and shocked to see Luthen out in public. I think Lonnie is even more shocked and frightened by seeing these people out in public, and he wasn't even really meant to be there. It was kind of a last-minute invite, and he says, "Okay, you guys should go to this instead. I can't be there."
And of course, he doesn't have a choice but to follow along with Clea.
Right.
As far as everyone else at the party is aware, she's just an art dealer.
Yeah, and they're just flirting on the side.
It's adorable. And infidelity is a big part of, apparently, based on Mask of Fear.
Mask of Fear, we've seen that through Mon Mothma's life quite a bit, and other people. So it's not as unsurprising cover story.
No, it's very interesting. And these upper echelons of the government, apparently infidelity is everything.
We see this group of all of these people, Luthen, Mothma, Krennic, Davos Golden, all going around and looking at each piece one by one.
And it is interesting to get these little stories about each piece. All the while, just the most stressful event of the evening, Clea is trying to get the listening device out from it's a beautiful book, and it's stuck.
Yes.
And so she is telling Lonnie about the book. In this culture, blindness was seen as a gift. And so this is how people who are blind would read the book. It's through touch. Touch was very important. And so very interested to see her touching the piece. And she's really building up for why she's fooling around with it.
Yes.
Is touching the piece. I think it's fascinating that they chose that piece probably purposely for a listening device because it could be easily touched on purpose. It was her favorite piece. They really built that up, that it was her favorite piece, and that's why she's fooling around with it.
Yes.
And she was telling the story to Lonnie while she's trying to get this done, and she can't get it out. And it got so many back and forths between different scenes while she's trying to do this, and I am stressed out to no end.
Yeah, she keeps, as this group is moving around the room, she keeps telling him, stand to the left. Further, go, take a step. And she's very powerful.
Oh,
she's very in command. Even though she's struggling, she doesn't lose focus of knowing where this group is, trying to get it out. We see her start to bleed because she's struggling so hard to be able to grip this thing and get it out of there. Because if she doesn't, it's going to be
over.
It's over.
Exactly. Fortunately for her, she's able to get it out.
Just in time.
And fortunately for her also, Lonnie was listening to her story. And he's able to basically corroborate that they were just talking about the book.
Yeah.
He's able to retell what the book is for.
Right.
Which is really interesting. We do see Skolden touch the book after her. And I think we're a little bit worried that maybe he would realize.
Yeah, I really, because we see the blood on Clea's hand, and she was also touching this book, then I thought there was going to be a drop of blood somewhere. But it's all okay.
Thankfully not.
Yeah.
And so we're leaving the party. We see a beautiful light moment with Clea and Luthen as they're walking out.
Yeah. They joke about saying we should have killed Krennic there. And they laugh.
You know what? Maybe they should have. It's fun to see them laugh. I think that's really the big difference between the Empire and the Rebels is that in the Rebellion, they're people. They're humans.
Yeah.
They have souls. They feel things.
They can have lighthearted moments, right? And we don't always see that with all of the rebel groups. Saw's partisans, we don't see that.
No.
Right? They're very much business, intense. Every day is a battle. Every day you might die either at the hands of your enemy or who you thought were your friends, as we see Saw Gerrera kill one of his guys that he claims was a spy, but whether he was or not, or just incompetent, we're not really sure. But they have this lighthearted moment, and that is important to have that idea of fighting for what you love instead of just killing what you hate, like looking up instead of looking down.
Well, here we're maneuvering towards the end, and we see a friend of ours, Dr. Gorst, walking into, I guess, his new lab,
right?
Torture room, really.
We'd only seen him in Nightmares.
A part that we really didn't touch on earlier was that they want to expand Dr. Gorst's program. And so clearly Dr. Gorst is coming here to prepare to expand his program, or they've already started expanding his program. And
Lonnie's there, and he hears that. And so we presume that Lonnie passed that information to Luthen and Clea, who then pass it to some of our friends on Coruscant.
So the lights are turned on in the torture room, and we see Bix in the corner there.
Yeah. She makes him get in the chair. She straps him down.
And she tells him just the most chilling line: "This will only feel like forever."
Which is what he told to her when he was torturing her in season 1. And it's just frightening.
The way she leaves him, she turns the torture device on, and the camera just pans out back into like the viewing room for the torture. And we can't hear his screams at all, but he's clearly in pain. And it's so cinematic. It's so beautiful. It's chilling.
It is.
And we see Bix walk away, and she kills a guard on her way out, and she's just walking away. She's very calm. She feels very in control, which is very different than how we've been seeing her.
Right. And like I said earlier, we hadn't seen her on a mission before. We'd heard about it. We know that something happened with Cassian and another Imperial that they killed on that mission. But now, she feels in control. She's able to handle herself. And it's kind of cool to see, like, she is also a competent agent.
Mm-hmm. And we see a shot from the trailers where she and Cassian are walking away from the explosion. I did think that was going to have more buildup when we saw it in the trailers. Not a criticism. I just thought it would have more buildup. I think it's very interesting. Dr. Gorst is clearly taken out.
Yeah. So we'll see if that helps Bix with her nightmares, to know that her torturer is gone. It won't be torturing anyone anymore.
It's interesting. The first 2 arcs have started with a nightmare from Bix. I'm curious if the next arc will also have a nightmare from Bix. I doubt it will feature Dr. Gorst. I think we're kind of overcoming Dr. Gorst at this point. But I'm curious if maybe we'll see something else that she's afraid of.
Yeah, and I wonder, igniting or blowing up a building on Coruscant is a big message. And so I'm expecting that Cassian and Bix will not be on Coruscant anymore. I think that's not a safe place, even with their safe house, a safe place for them to be very much, because they've really just sent a message.
I'm very intrigued to see where they end up. So what are our third arc predictions? What are we thinking? Obviously, based on the timeline in Rebels, the Ghorman Massacre pretty much has to take place in the next arc.
Right.
Which means Mon Mothma has to lead the Senate in the next arc. I'm hoping we get her Imperial speech.
Yes.
Bix and Cassian probably aren't going to be on Coruscant anymore.
Right. And I'm wondering, I thought in this arc we would see K2SO.
Yes.
But maybe it's going to be in the next arc. I don't remember the trailer shots well enough. We should go back and look and see, like, can we tell, is K2SO on Ghorman? Because if he is, then it's going to be this next arc when we meet K2SO. But it also feels like maybe that could be a quick thing that happens. But feels like meeting K2SO, this very important character for Cassian, is going to be smushed in with the Ghorman Massacre and all of this big event that we're building up to. But I'm hopeful that they'll honor, just as they did the Tarkin Ghorman Massacre, they'll honor the Andor and K2SO miniseries, or
it's a one shot.
Yeah, the one shot that they did.
It'd be interesting. I'm truthfully not super optimistic. I'm, of course, such a stickler for canon. I love when things are consistent. The story does always need to come first. And I think they've done a very good job making things line up so far, like you said. So fingers crossed they at least reference it or give a nod towards it.
Yeah.
It's a fairly unimportant one shot.
Right. Yeah, it's a really quick read. If you haven't read it, maybe this week is a good one to read before these episodes drop. The one group that I'm really curious about, and I don't know how they're going to come into play because they've been very separate from all the others, is the Partisans with Saw Gerrera. We see Willman there, but I wonder if they're going to be on Ghorman. And they are very much the ones that ignite and blow up things and make a loud statement. And I wonder if they're going to be part of the reason why the whole Ghorman massacre starts.
It could be. Before the show, I had speculated that the Partisans would be the cause. They would be the rebellion that caused that. And at this point, the Ghorman Front is going to be that.
Right. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Saw and the Partisans and Willman as we go forward. I know I think I speculated in our first episode that by the end of this series, Brasso, Willman, and Bix will all be not a part of Cassian's life anymore, whether they die or something else happens that completely takes them away. We don't see any of those three characters in Rogue One, so I think they would give an explanation for what happened. And so we'll see in this next episode what occurs and if that comes true.
I think just like Rogue One, I think this show is probably just going to end in death.
Yeah, I don't think we're going for happy endings and everyone goes off into a twin sunset.
No, that's not this show.
Well, for our next episode, we'll see you next week. We're going to be breaking down the next arc, the 2 BBY arc, and we have some expectations. And so hopefully you'll see us there.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us to talk about the galaxy far, far away. You can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok as Rogue 3 Media. We look forward to talking with you at the next rendezvous point.